Okay, so one of each was just 2 colors of wood, 4 pieces glued together. These are 3/4 inch, and it gives me a 3x3 block. And from that, you can just turn a simple mill. It'll look like this with the 2 colors. And the pattern is just a simple round globe on top, 1 groove on the bottom. So there's not a whole bead or anything like that with it. Okay, this one again is the same layout with 2 different colors, but it's got a little more detail. You've got the groove on top, a little step there, a little bead down on the bottom. So just different ways you can do them, but that's just a simple four pieces. The next one is just a solid block, and then I've got veneer inlaid in there. And I usually just use like a gallon paint can. I mark off 9 inches on there because it's an 8-inch pepper mill, and you lose some for the tenon in the middle. So you'll draw one a little closer to the bottom, bring one up a little farther to the top. So I usually do 3 cutouts. I'll do one going this way, one just the opposite, stay about a 1/2 inch in from the edge. That way when you cut it out, the block stays solid and you can clamp it up easier. And I always put an X on one side. When you got it out, gluing it up, it's easy to turn it around and then they don't fit like they should. So if you put an X on, your orientation is good. And then when I clamp them, I'll usually start with a clamp in the middle and then do the ends. And you can line up the X. You can kind of push them so that they come out good. And if you want to lay out the veneer when you cut it, you don't have to measure real good. I just let it stick over 1/2 inch. Just rotate the block down, mark off a little extra on the other end, and then just take a scissors and cut it. So I got my X up. And if you wet it a little bit and the glue will wet it, that'll pull in there pretty nice, and you just clamp it up. Like I said, you want to make sure that the corners and the X line up. And you can do that as you tighten your clamps to pull it in. So that will give you that pattern. And then the pepper mill will turn out with lines on it like this. Depending on how much you overlap them and the size of the radius on the circles that you're making. Then the other one, you start out with a basic block again with the 2 colors, but you end up with a diagonal on it. So it stands out a little better, and they look pretty, I like the way they look that way. So just got to get them to come out on the right angle.
What size did you say your blocks work, Pete?
This one is maple and walnut, and I do maple and cherry, sometimes popple, depending on whatever. But to get the diagonal, you start out with the straight block, cut a diagonal across it, side to side, corner to corner, and you just flip them over and put them like that. So now you've got your diagonal, and then when you're clamping them up, you need to put a clamp across the corners, because as you tighten it up, they're going to start slipping. So you just want to kind of lock them in so they can't move. Then usually 6 clamps, 3 on each side, 1 in the middle, 1 on each edge, maybe a 1/2 inch in from the corners to pull them up tight. Flip them over, do the other side. And then after they're glued up and dried a little bit, just take a tri-square and then square off both ends because they're on an angle now. And that will give you a pattern then that looks like this on a bias. And then if you're just doing a simple shape, you can just do one like this. I mean, it's just flat on both ends, and just a little simple shape in the center. Just taper it down, and it works. It works just as good. So this is a little 6-inch salt shaker on top, pepper grinder on the bottom. So today I'm just going to use this one and then just turn a mill with probably just a couple of beads on each end and a round on top.
What kind of glue do you use?
I'm using Tight Bond 3. It's waterproof. It's a little longer stick time, but it works good. It's a little darker. I don't think it shows up as much as a white glue would when you've got the different colors in there. It kind of blends in better, I think.
And how long do you wait before you start working it?
A couple of weeks.
Couple of weeks. Wow.
Yep, I found that, well, the glue is wet, so it brings the moisture up, and it's down in the middle of a 3-inch block. And I've turned somewhere, I pushed it a little bit, and it turns good, but as it dries, you get a little bit of an offset in the wood. So you can just feel the edges where the different woods met. So I wait a little bit. When I cut them diagonally, I'll still wait a week before I put them on the bandsaw or cut the arcs. I'll glue a piece in, wait a few days, and then cut the next one. Otherwise, you get a little sticky glue on the bandsaw blades. So a little bit of patience. When I glue them up, I usually do 5 or 6 at a time. So now we're just going to take it and make it round using the roughing gouge. And we're probably going to run at around 1,000 RPM. So can you hear me over the lathe running?
Yeah.
Okay.
We hear you.
So on all the cuts, you always do the ABCs. You anchor the tool, bring it up and let the bevel touch, and then pull it down until it starts to cut, and then take it across every cut. Anchor, bevel, cut. And you always start somewhere on the wood and go off to the end. Don't start on the end and come in. It's hard to judge your thickness, and you're going to get a catch, maybe tear a big chunk out. So always start on the wood, anchor, get the bevel, and cut. And we're going to turn it just so it's round. We're not looking to make any special diameter other than round. Okay, I'm going to move the tool rest in just a little bit. And to get a parallel cylinder, I line the edge of the tool rest up with the edge of the lathe bed, and that should give you a pretty smooth, straight cylinder. And when it's spinning, if you look in at the end, you can see kind of a fuzzy edge versus a solid edge. That's about how much you got left to take off to make it round. It should be pretty close. Just a little bit. Another easy way to tell if you laid a tool up on top, you can hear the difference when it bounces. Yeah, not even a 16th yet. On my last cut, I'm using the flat side of the roughing gouge. It's a little easier to get a smoother cut. Kind of blends it in a little better. And we're not going for pretty right now, just for round. So on an 8-inch pepper mill, I usually cut my blanks about 11 inches long. And the bottom part of the pepper mill is usually 6 inches. And then you got another 2 inches to make 8, but you don't mark that yet because you're going to have about a 3/8 tenon that's going to drop down in there. So right now I'm going to put 3 tenons on, one here, one on that end, and one on this end. That'll be my way to mount them so I can drill the holes in them. And I'll have a little excess wood later. If I make a mistake, I can always have room to correct it. So I'll just use the parting tool and make a couple of tenons. Don't have to be real deep, but you want them deep enough that you can hold them with the chuck. Okay, so I've got a tenon on each end of my 6-inch piece, so I can drill from both ends on that. And this one I'm just going to drill up this way with the 5/16 bit. So now I'm going to part it off, cut it in half. And making the groove a little wider just so that you don't get a binding when you get down a little deeper and burn it. Oh, you could turn it all the way down and just catch it, but I'm going to grab Kelly's saw and just saw that off a little bit. So you can usually tell which ends go together, especially if you got a figured wood. But if you want to make sure you don't make a mistake, just put an X. Those ends will go together. So now I'm going to mount it in the chuck and then start drilling the holes. Get the fuzzies off of there so it fits in nice. Just make sure I'm on the center. Okay, the instructions call for an 1 5/8" hole, a 1/2 inch deep, and I know on this bit it'll be just up where the shiny is, and I'll be deep enough. And drilling about 450 RPM. So that'll be the recess to hold the bottom part of the grinder. And I brought 2 different bits because I think one of them might be dull. So now it calls for 1 1/16 all the way through the bottom part. You have to stop and clean the bit out once in a while so you don't get a lot of buildup in there. Jam the bit.
Yeah, I'd like to interject here while Pete's drilling it on. If everybody would mute their microphone, you'd be able to see Pete. The problem is that when you have noise in the background, it takes over the video and switches away from Pete, and you can hear him, but you can't see him. So if you could mute your mics, I think that might help a lot.
Okay, I've got the, go ahead, Jerry. Okay, I've got the hole drilled partway through. So now when I'm this far, I'm going to get this cleaned up. I'm just going to undercut this a little bit so it sits flat on the table when you're done. Okay. 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 All right, Jerry asked that if you're not talking, just mute your mics because there's too much interference and it keeps picking up on the noise rather than the camera. So just mute your systems. So now I'm just going to smooth the bottom up a little bit and undercut it just a little bit. Run the speed up. And while it's mounted, I'll just finish up the bottom edge, a little 120 and a little 180 or 240 after that. Again, turn the speed down around 500. So the bottom is pretty good. And I'll turn it around now and finish drilling the hole from the other end. It'll be again an 1 1/16. And the speed is still turned down from before for sanding. Okay, again, that was just cut off with the parting tool. So I'm going to go back in and just undercut that just a real little bit, smooth it up. If you lay your tool on there, you can tell if you're flat or not, and it's pretty well flat. I'm going to take just a tad more off. Okay. So now the bottom part is pretty well ready to go, just to turn the final shape. Got the little knockout in there yet. So then I'll put the top piece in. Clean that up just a little bit, get rid of the nub so the drill bit can start a little easier. A little bit high in the center. Okay, now I have to make an 1 1/16 tenon. That's going to fit inside the top part here. So I'll just use a parting tool for that. So you can see how far we got to go, so quite a bit to go. But you want to check a few times. So now I'll just take the outside cut and try to get that close. Just a little bit loose on the end, so I can't go quite that much. A little bit looser than I wanted, but it'll be all right. You kind of want a snug fit so that when you're turning, it doesn't move around on you a little bit. And if you really get it screwed up, you just cut it off and move up a little bit. That's why you got that extra length in there. So I'm going to undercut again, just a little bit on here. And just check and see if it's flat. A little bit high, so I can take a little more off, and I'll leave a little bit of a shoulder to try to get that to pull in a little tighter. It's easier now to get that smoothed up a little bit. And I've got a little bit of a shoulder there. Just take a little bit more off of that. It's close. Okay, it gives me a nice tight fit too. Okay, now I'm going to drill an inch or 5/16 for the stem to go through. So you want to make sure you're probably going to go at least 2.5 inches, because the top is going to be 2 inches plus your tenon on the bottom. Again, got the speed turned down a little bit. So now we're ready to put the two parts together and then start shaping the outside of the pepper mill. So we'll put the live center on and then we'll add the cone at the same time. It goes through the hole just so it doesn't spin when you're turning the cone on. And the cone fits real nice into that 1 5/8. So it gives you a little room. You've already got that cleaned up and sanded, so you're looking good there. If you want, you can line up the pattern, but it really doesn't make any difference. Looks like it fits up good. I like the tool rest a little bit higher when I'm doing the beads. So now you turn it to your final diameter, wherever you want your pepper mill to be. Probably going to go down to about 2 1/4 for diameter. So again, I'll just use a roughing gouge, take off all this extra, and then I can finish the last shape. I'm going to drop it down for roughing gouge where it should be at center, a little below. Again, anchor, find a bevel, and then cut. That's why it didn't make much difference at the beginning. You just wanted to get round, but it didn't have to be pretty because this is all coming off anyway. Move my tool rest in a little bit and check my diameter. Yeah, just about 1/4 inch yet. Just double checking my tool rest that I'm parallel to the bed, just off a little bit. Just a little bit. It's pretty smooth right now. Just take a little more off. Like I say, when you use a roughing gouge and you use that flat side, you can smooth it out pretty good. Go slow, give it a chance to cut and stay clean. It's pretty uniform, just a tad more. And you can go by the shape. 2 1/4 doesn't have to be. If you got bigger hands, go a little bigger. And if you got small hands or just women, might want to go a little smaller than that even. Okay, I'll just sand it a little bit because wherever the bead is, it's going to be almost the final diameter on the top of the bead. So I'll just take a little 180 and just hit it lightly. You always sand from the bottom. You can go across the top if you're not grabbing onto it too tight, but you don't want to jam your fingers with it rotating towards you, so usually from the bottom. And again, at around 500 RPM. See, most of this is coming off anyway. Just want to make sure it's smooth where the beads are. Now I'm going to raise it up a little bit. Line it up with the tool rest with the bed. And I'll probably put a couple beads on the bottom. The bottom bead, because it's narrower, that 1 5/8 goes up to about here. So I'll probably start a bead here. One there. One there. One there. That one go up a little bit there. Then we'll mark the center of the bead. And I'll mark off the final 8 inches, which would be right there. I'll just take the parting tool and take that down a little bit so I know right where the top is. Okay, so starting to bead, you got to cut a little groove so you have room for the cut to go as you get deeper. So I'm just going to start here, go in from both sides a little bit, touch the back of the tool so you're anchored, swing the handle over till it cuts, and then rotate it so your flute is vertical up and down, and the handle over far enough so you won't get a catch. Do the same on this one. And if you want to make a round bead, you have to make sure that you keep swinging the handle all the way through the cut. If you don't swing the handle, it's just going to wind up as a straight cut on a slant. And I think I'm going to leave that half and just incorporate that into the half, or the handle. So I'll do the next bead up here. The edge of the bead will be right in the middle where it rotates. And because I undercut it, as you take that edge away a little bit, it's going to move over just a tad. But that way you know you always got a tight fit and you're not going to have a cracks showing. Something's moving. A little bounce in there. I'm going to start shaping the bottom part here, hourglass shape. And you're always cutting downhill toward the center. And you start in the middle where the most wood has got to be removed and work your way back from there. So I'm just basically making a big cove. I'm just going to take this shoulder out of there. Stopping about in the middle. Take a little bit more off of this one. Don't like that little ridge I've got there. I'm going to see if I can take it down a little bit. And I'll have to bring this one down to match. And then up on top, just going to try to make a round ball out of that. So again, you need to know where the center is. About there. Move my tool rest over and make a little more room to get in there. And I'll double check to make sure I still got 8 inches there. And it's good. Need to be closer. And go a little deeper on the top again. You got to remember you got a 5/16 hole in that little piece yet. So now I want to make the ball where the top is going to come around and meet down that deep. Need a little bit more tool rest. Get the back of the tools touching. Swing the handle till tip starts to cut and then go forward. And just keep swinging the handle. And then straighten up in here a little bit. A little ridge right there. And we'll do one little cut in the groove. There are little bit marks there, but otherwise that's about where I'm going to leave it. Matter of fact, I can see a hole through the spindle up there on that last cut. So now I'll go down around 450, do a little light sanding. Probably start with 120. Just kind of keep moving back and forth. You get less ridges marked in it. And if you got an orbital sanding tool, it cleans it up a little better. Take a little bit off the edges. It's pretty well it. I'll put a little 220 on there quick and then part it off and then put the kit in it. Little tear out right there, it looks like, from the maple. I think I'll just turn that down a little bit and get rid of it. Shouldn't show too much. Yep, still a little bit. Must have been a little crack in the wood there because it chipped out a little wider even. It's still getting there. Okay, that took care of it. So now I just take the bottom half off, and then part off the top. And just sand off the little bit of a nub on top and a parting tool mark. So that should be about it. And when you finish it, you'll probably sand this out a little bit, just so as you add the varnish to it, it doesn't get too tight in there, but pretty well it. Lines up pretty good even with that 1/2 inch taken out. So to put the kit in, I usually do it on the tool bench at home. I've got a hole drilled for to hold down dogs and stuff, so it's a little easier to hold it. So we'll see how many parts wind up in the sawdust and we can't find them. There's one. Okay, we should end up with 4 screws, a spring, the grinder mechanism. So to put the handle in, the stem in, you got a little square on the grinder part. Just slides in and drops down. This part will drop in this way. And that'll fit in at 1 5/8 really good. You slide the spring on with the big end, goes down like this. And then the shaft has to drop through a hole somewhere so it's out of the way. And I should probably put the grinder part on too. So you got the spring, the grinder part, and it's got 2 little notches in there that fits over the bracket. And then drop it through. Line those up, make sure it fits. Then this hold down. It says made in the USA and the other one says stainless, so it kind of nice to turn it so the writing is at least matches in the same direction. Line up the holes, pre-drill a hole for the screws because they're you want to make sure that those little grooves did line up under that bracket, and they do. So you get one in and then drill the other hole. That way they line up for sure. I think this is size 0 Phillips screwdriver. Fits the screw heads pretty good. So that's that part. And then on this end, yeah, a little balance on there maybe. This has got a rounded edge. You can hardly see it, a little shinier than the other side. You just center that on the tenon best you can. Just like watching paint dry. And then just spin it so you're centered again. Drill the second hole. That should go right over. Okay, I got to sand a little bit because that little ridge I left in there is holding it up. But you got enough stem sticking up, and it'll be up farther yet once I sand that little bit out of there. And then you can adjust the depth of the grind by how tight you turn the screw. And it should spin. I usually put on 6 coats of a wipe-on gloss polyurethane. And when I'm wiping it on, I usually clamp some dowels on my workbench so you don't have the kit in when you're putting the poly on. So I just run it through a dowel, have it clamped on the bench. That way you can wipe it down. It's not touching anything. You don't get finger marks and dirt on it. And the top part, just use a 1/4 inch dowel, because if it's a 5/16 hole, you can thread on a bunch of them and wipe those up right away too. And most of the time I'll do the inside of the pepper mill as well. I'll take a dowel, cut a slot in it with a rag on it, like cleaning a bore on a rifle barrel, and then just kind of give it a coat or 2 on the inside. And then normally hand sand with the grain just to get rid of all any marks that are left. So basically that's the quick and dirty way of doing one. Going to donate it to the raffle today, so if somebody wants it, they can have it. So you got one for Christmas. So any questions?
So Pete, most of your cuts were done with a spindle gouge.
Yep, all of them were spindle gouge because you're going with the grain running with the bed of the lathe, so that's just mostly spindle turning. And even on the end, on the end grain, you can use a spindle gouge for that. But you want to just make sure that you always touch the back of the tool first before the point touches, and you shouldn't get a catch or you shouldn't get run out. So you just got to go in slow and make sure the back touches first, swing the handle till it cuts, and then go forward.